Now what's up guys, welcome back. Now from the previous tutorial I have an assumption that you have already installed Composer. Now if you've not installed Composer, there are 3 links over there I've sent on how to install Composer on your machine. We have the Mac and we have the Linux and we have the Windows machine for that case. Now to check whether Composer is properly installed, you have to type Composer -v, and you'll see there are a list of commands which we'll use some and some will not use in our project as far as Laravel is concerned. Now, in order for us to create a project, a Laravel project in itself, we need to write this command. Now, currently I have a template for blog that we'll be using. I've shared a link below, and I have a couple of notes here on everything that we're going to do. We're going to look installation and application structure, the routing views and controller, the configurations, the form and database, authentication and middleware, that is the login, logout, the signups, and the role management. And then finally, we'll see how to upload this project into our server. Now, in order for us to create a simple Laravel project, this is what you do. We are going to write a command: composer create project, create Laravel. Now by default, if you don't specify, okay, there's another thing you can add. You can add composer create Laravel, and then you write the folder name, for example Laravel beginner series, something like that. If you don't specify the folder name, by default it creates a folder called Laravel, and then it installs the folder and the files over there. It adds the folder and files over there. Now let's wait for a moment before it installs, and there we are done. Now if you check over here, let me just do a quick refresh. We have a Laravel over here, and we have several folders and files over here. Now basically installation of this Laravel, it doesn't take much of the time, because it's actually, I think it's 10 to 12 MBs. I don't know whether that is exact size. The last time I checked it was that, and it's so easy and simple to install actually. Now real quick, let's check the application of structure. And you'll notice that we have several folders and subfolders. To start with, we have the app folder. This includes almost the entire source code of the project. It contains what you call exceptions, middlewares, controllers, and it also contains what we call the events of the project. But basically our focus mainly for this project will be on the HTTP over here. We'll be having controllers and middlewares, of which we'll talk more about them as time goes by. We also have something to do with the bootstrap, which encloses all the application bootstrap scripts. It contains a subfolder called cache over here as seen, which includes all the file association for catching a web application or caching a web application. You can also find the app.php, which actually initializes the scripts necessary to bootstrap the application. We also have the config folder over here, which includes various configuration for the project, which I'll not touch on right now in the beginner series, but I'll touch on them as time goes by. But I might talk about app as time goes by and auth in this tutorial. We also have the database, which includes the seeding, migration, and the factories. Mostly in this tutorial we'll use migrations and seeding, and we'll see how it works basically. We also have the public, which carries all the assets, including the images, the videos, and many other things that you have in the project. You'll notice that it has the .ht access, which gives which gives the server configuration, and index.php over here, which is required for the initialization of the web application. What else do we have? We have the resources folder over here, which carries assets, the lang for localization and internalization, and the views. This is where we'll create our views. This is what will be displayed in the browser. Okay, and then we have what we call the route file, which is used for routing. I will use web mainly. I will talk about the rest as time goes by, but this is what I'll be using mainly for routing. This is what points towards the URL that you're going to use in the project, in the address. This is like the address over here, and we'll talk more as time goes by. We also have the storage, which carries all the logs and necessary files required frequently when the project is running. Yes, we have the tests over here folder, and we also have what we call the vendor, which is very important. It is used to actually carry all the third-party libraries and scripts that are required by composer as dependencies. Now that being said, we also have some important things like the .env, which carries some configurations of the project, and the artisan, which is actually connected to the artisan commands. Now that being said, let's get in and start running our Laravel application. Now guys, welcome back. Now what I've done basically is that I've just opened the folder, the Laravel folder. It's so simple, just click on file, open folder if you don't know how to do it, and then Laravel over here, then okay. Now I have everything over here. My concern is going to be in 4 folders, that is the resources, the routes, and app over here, and public as well. Now to start with, let's look at the routes and look at the web.php. This is used for routing of web application. Now what happens is that this always points to the address. This is always points to where you actually want to navigate to. Now how do I run a Laravel project? It's so simple. Let me open a new terminal here, and then we'll have php artisan serve. Now if you serve it, there's an address you're given over here. This is what you run in your preferred browser. So it's 127.0.0.1 and the port is 8000, and then you click enter. Now if you run an Laravel application, this is how it looks like basically. Now what happens is that we have a route over here which points to a controller, and then it points to a view. But for this case, the route only points to a view, which is actually read from the resources and views folder over here. Now blade uses .blade.php. Don't forget about that. If you forget about it and use welcome.php, you'll get different results. Now what happens is that whenever I want to change the URL over here and say, let's say for example welcome, if I run this, it doesn't display, it will bring an error. For now, let me just comment that out. Then let me return something like 123. Now if I run, you notice that it is not being found, because actually this is what we run in the address to actually show on our application, right? Now if I type the URL /welcome, you'll notice that I get whatever I have written over there, 123. And basically that is how it works. We can have a resource, we can have a route over here that actually points to the address. Now if you want to use a view, for the case of this, you can return a view. For example, it's returned here, return view welcome. If you come and check on the resources views folder, you'll see there's a file called welcome.blade.php. Now this is what is read, so that if I refresh this browser, I'll get the Laravel application with this particular view. Now let me fall back to where I was initially, that is slash. And if I go back and refresh the browser, you notice that welcome is not being found, but the slash is being found. Right now, you might be asking a question, what if it's in a folder? Because the best way to do this, best way to work with the views, is actually creating folders. Now let's say I have something like welcome, okay, pages, and then I need this welcome to actually be displayed over here. Now currently if I run this page, it will tell me that there's something that is not being found. The view is not being found. Now suppose I created a folder called pages for it, and I want to read these pages. How do I do it? Well, it's so simple. What you do is that you write the folder name, that is pages, and then you write a dot, and then you write the welcome itself. Now this is one way you can do it. There's also another way that I noticed you can do it. You can use a slash, okay, and then if you refresh, still it comes, and that is how it happens. Now suppose you have very many routes, and you want to display all the routes, and let's say this route you have welcome, this route let's say you have maybe contact us, let's say contact us. Okay, any other routes we can have maybe about now you'll notice that whenever you are creating these routes, there comes a point that they'll become too many, and at some point the routes file will be this web.php will be too big, and we don't want that to happen. We want to create a small code as possible. That is why I'm going to introduce to something called controllers. Now this is what happens. Having this will bring or will give us a lot of work. Now before I go to that part, let me just show you that everything works. Let's say this is the welcome page. Let's say this is the contact us page. Contact us. I'm returning some stuff. And let's say this is the about. Okay. Let me terminate. Good. Let me just confirm whether these routes are really working. We have contact us, should return contact us, right? We have about, should return about. Sorry. And that is how things work. Now as I've said, having this many routes file will really make this file to be big. Now how do we make it smaller? That is where the controllers come in. We have some routes here that points to a controller and then points to our view here, right? Now let me remove this real quick. Now let me do an example with this so that you can see. Now as I told you previously, we'll be using artisan commands, and these artisan commands I'll say some in this tutorial, but in the beginner series I'll talk more about the other that are more advanced, that I feel that are more advanced. Now to start with, to create a controller is so simple. We make php artisan make controller. Now this controller will appear in this controller over here, this controller folder, app http controller folder over here. Now php artisan make controller, we write the controller name. Let's say for example pages what controller, and click enter. You'll be told that as a controller has been created successfully. Now suppose I refresh over here, you see there's a pages controller. Now you might be asking, how can I create this controller inside a folder? Because anyway, creating the controller again in over here, suppose you have over 10 controllers, I think, okay, 20 controllers, I feel it's so big. We can have folders. Let's say we want pages to be in the pages controller to be in the pages. How do we do it? Now it's quite simple. So we'll have the same command, and then we'll have pages / pages controller. If I refresh this page, you'll see that there's a folder called pages with pages controller, right? Now I don't know which one to use, but it depends. Now you should notice there's a controller is created that extends a controller. If you've done OOP, you'll understand better what extends does. Now it has a namespace of app http controller. This other one, pages controller, has a namespace of app http controllers, and then we have the pages controller. Now how do I make this web and create a routes file that has a controller that points to this, and then this points to this particular view over here? I have a web that points to a controller, which is pages controller, that again points to a view. Now this is also quite simple. What happens is that you first have to kind of, okay, there are many ways to do it, but this is one of the ways I'm going to show you how to do it. Now first of all, what do we need? We need to use what is actually here and call it over here, right? So we'll have use app, just a moment, use app / http / controllers. Now if you forget, you don't have to master this. You don't have to master this. If you check over here in pages controller, it's already here as a namespace anyway. App HTTP controllers, that is app HTTP controllers. And then which controller is this? It is the pages controller. Right. Now, suppose I want to create the routes. For that, what do we do? Just write a route. It's a get method. Okay. And then it's like the home directory or the slash there, and then we'll have pages controller. Do that class. What are we looking for? We are looking for what we call the function itself, which is the index over there. Now this ceases not to operate. Let me just terminate it instead of deleting it. This is how we uncomment things. Now that being said, this route points to a pages controller that has, this is the function name, which is called index. Okay, so we'll create a function. How do we call this function? We call it index. Well, there are two types of programmers. There's one who puts this opening over here, and there's some who put it here. I'm the kind who puts it here. It's just me. And then what happens here? We return a view. Same way we are doing it on the other side. We return a view. Now we created it in a folder, so it will be pages dot or slash, and then welcome. You don't say welcome.blade.php, you just say welcome. It's so simple. And then what do we do next? We have to terminate. Now if you come over here and refresh the page, this does not exist. This is what exists. This is what you get. And I can prove over here that it exists by adding a new HTML. I deleted the one that was HTML code over here, and then I have home page. And if I refresh this real quick, you'll see it's the home page over here. So this points to this. Now suppose I want to pass some variables. How do I do it? I need to pass a variable called title, and I don't need to be writing the title like home page over here each and every time. How do I do it? Well, it's so simple. You can create another variable over here. Let's say it's the title, and then at the title we can write the name, maybe home page. Now we need to display this in the views. Now how do we do it? It's so simple. We can do it two ways. One of the ways you can do it is that you can pass it with the title as title, with this title variable, okay, so that if I come to the welcome and call the title over here, this is how double opening and closing quotation marks, we call the title, you will notice that it appears, it will appear. You don't terminate over here, you don't terminate over here, you don't terminate there. No, that is wrong. So if I refresh this page, you'll see the home page is called successfully. Now suppose I want to add this description. How do I do it? So simple. We add description, and then we add the description like this is home page. Suppose you have said that is already home page, so we also need to add with description, which will be displayed as description variable over here. And then I can call the description over here. Let me use p tags, and this is how we do it. Add description. Okay, so that if I refresh this page, the description will appear. This is the home page. But imagine you having several variables here and you need to display them. How will you do that? Well, this is how I do it, and this is what I recommend you to do it, because it creates very small work for you. Now we can create an array. Let's say this is something totally made up. Let's say with page, we create an array that has title, and we are also going to create an array that has description. Okay, now there's a second way of passing it that I didn't say. You can use compact. such that we'll have over here with page. With page is this over here that I've created over here with page. Now anything that I pass with page title is the title will be added over here with page title. Okay, and we can also have with page description. Okay, right, so that if I refresh this page, everything still works. That is the best way to do it. I don't know how you guys do, the people of interactive Laravel. I don't know how you guys do it, but this is how I do it, so that I can only have one compact over here, and I can also have many things that I can add in my array actually, so that I can actually display them. Can also have something like maybe content, just adding random things. This is the content. Now you notice I don't have to add anything over there. I just come here again and create and add my p tag, and I'll have with page content, and that is how easy it becomes, and that is how easily you do it. And this is what I recommend actually, because it makes work easier. This is the content. With that being said, how do I pass parameters over here so that I actually want to display something that let's say for example I say maybe blogs/blogs. How do I pass /blogs with something like this over here with the parameter over here? Now it's so simple. Let me create another routes. Forgive me for copying. If you're copying and you know what you're copying, there's no problem. But if you're copying and you don't know what you're doing, then that is being stupid. I must say that. Now we have /blogs. And then how do we actually pass that required parameter? Like this is how we pass it. For that case, let's say it's an ID. Okay, let's create another function here. Let's say testing ID. Okay, any name is required. You can use any name, but this is the name I've just preferred and used over here, testing ID. So we'll have a public function, testing ID. And what happens is that is passed as a over here as at ID. Okay, so that if I return at ID, not at $ID, and I come and refresh this page, it will return 1. If I pass 2, it will return 2, and if I pass 3 or anything else, it will pass and it will display it over there. That is how we pass required parameters. Now I'll not teach about optional for this case. I'll talk about optional later when we start creating our blogs, and we don't need to actually display this ID. We need to display slag, so we need to display something else. I'll talk more about how we can use optional parameters over here. Now the next thing you're going to check on is how do I add assets, how do I add images. But basically, after teaching you about this, how do I add styles, for example styles, how do I add them, it will be much more easier for you to actually understand how do I add images. It will be the same case. Now I told you that in the public folder is where we'll be adding our assets. For now, have that knowledge for now. This is where we'll be adding our assets. Okay, now we'll create a folder called, let's say CSS. Let's create a file called test.css. okay, now I need to add this test.css in my project over here. Let me give this a class so that I can have a better description of what I'm doing. And then .red, and then color. Please autosave color. Oh, by the way, there's this cool feature called autosave that prevents you from dialing control S every time. You can check on it. It's over here, files, autosave over here. Now red. Okay, now to map that is very simple. We are going to use what we call the asset. Now we're going to do opening and closing double, and then we add asset. Okay, now we have a folder called css that has test.css. Please do not confuse the slash over here with a dot for the case that I had over here in writing my views. Don't use a dot here, use a slash. Okay, now if I refresh this page, you'll notice that it's not this, it's this. My home page is not yet color red. I don't know why it doesn't want to be color red. Oh, there's a slight mistake. So we have assets, not assets. We have css, and we have test, not text, right? So if I refresh this, sorry, if I refresh this, you'll see that it becomes red. That is how we had css. We can also add image in that particular way. Just create a folder called image, and then you add an image over there. Once you called it, let's say image, let's say you have an imaginary image. It's the same case. You'll have asset. If you have a folder, you call the folder name, that is img, and then slash the image name img dot okay imaginary image dot png maybe. And that is how we actually do it for all assets that are required for your project itself. Now, with that being said, I think I've talked about how do I use routes, how do I use controllers, and how do I point them to views, and I've told you the best practice on how to actually display these things from controllers to the views themselves. With that being said, I think that is a better introduction over the same. We will check on a second part, which is actually templating blades. How do I how do I actually add an external suppose you have an external HTML and CSS, how do I actually integrate it to the project? Now welcome back, guys. Now the next thing we're talking about is how do I add a template that I have to my project. Now if you check on the links below, I have what we call a folder called blog templates that has the HTML, which will actually HTML and CSS, which will actually use in the project to actually display a blog. It's kind of beautiful. Let me check, let me show you how it looks like. It's over here. It's blog template. Okay, I didn't add CSS. I've made the CSS so that you can see how it looks like. This is not Laravel. This is just something that you should know. It's style. Okay, it's already style.css. This is what we're going to use for a project, and this is how we'll be displaying our blogs, and hopefully I know we'll have something fancy and beautiful over there. Now suppose I need to add this to my project over here. How do I do it? Now let me create another file in the pages over there. Let me call it blog, or let me just create a new folder altogether. Let me call this folder blog. Okay, and let me create a file called blog, or maybe not blog, let me just call it content.blade.php. Okay, so we already have content.blade.php, and I need to read this blog content. I need to add this over here. Now it's so simple. I just have to pick the code over here and paste it over there, and the style too, I have to take the style. I have to put in the public folder. I can put it over here, but suppose there are many CSS file, it will be so big, so I just put it over here in CSS folder. I don't know why they have copied the wrong thing. It's this that I needed to copy and paste and delete this. How do I delete it? Okay, that's how I delete it. So I need to call this style.css. It's in, we use asset, and then we use the folder name css slash style.css, and then we close it. Okay, so that if I come, I need, what do I need next? Let me just close this and close my live server. If you've never used live server, test it out. It's good for HTML and CSS. Yeah, so I need this pages controller with this path to actually point to that. How do I do it? Very simple. I'll have to go to my app, HTTP controllers. I'll go to pages controller, and then it's actually blog. Okay, I'll have blog. Sorry, it's blog dot content. So that if I refresh this page right now, we must see something else different. That is how we've integrated it, as easy as that. And one thing I must say is that if you use assets function over here, you see it points to the URL that you're having currently, and then it looks in the public folder and gets the CSS file that you actually need or require. Now, how do we link one? How do we actually link one? How do we create hrefs? How do we create hrefs? How do we create this like the homepage and then we link it to another, maybe about us? Well, I'm not good in styling, but I'll show you how we do it. We can have an ordered list, and then we have a list over here. Let's say this is the homepage, and then let's say this is the about us. Let's retain about us, and then let's have hrefs over here. So this is what I'm doing, and I have, this is what I'm doing right now. Okay, we can have this. We can have an href. Now, for this case, we use what we call route. Okay, let me just call a route over here. Route has some parameters you must pass. Now, there are two ways you can do it. One of the ways is that in Laravel, we can use what we call named routes. Now, what do I mean by named routes? This is about page. Named routes is a concept that really means nothing so big. It only means giving a route a name. Like for example, this route, you give it a name. Let's say this is homepage. Okay. Like for example, this is about us. Just give it a name. About us. Give it a name. About us. Okay. About us. Something like that. Okay. Let me just give it the function that will be called about us. Let me leave it that way. I'll create the function later. So what happens is that we have home page and about us. We can come over here, and for home page, I'll give it the route that I've named over there as home page. For about us, I'll give it the route named over there as about us. Should be one. So that if I go back and refresh the page, I'll have the home page and I'll have about us. I need to pick this and put it inside here. Where? Here. And about us, I need to pick it and put it over here. So what do you notice? You notice that if I click home page, it returns me to the home page. If I click about us, which is noted there, it will tell me the method does not exist. So let's go and create it. So public function, it's about us, and we have something like this, and then we need to pick everything over here. Let me just pick everything over here. If you know what you're doing, I accept you can copy, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're not sure about what you're doing, please don't do whatever I'm doing. Just write it from scratch. So we have about us. Actually, this saves me a lot of time, and once you have the knowledge, there's no problem with that. This is about page. Okay, this is the content of about page. Okay, so it is okay. Blog dot, let me create blog dot about, and then let me create about for blog here, about dot blade dot php, and then blah blah blah. This is about page. Okay. That being said, and that being added, now I think it should be there. I don't think, I know it should be there. About is over there. This is about page, and you have noticed that suppose you need to retain this piece of code, whatever is from this section up to here, and whatever is here up to here, the there's a way you can do it. I want to show the links over here, and I don't need to write this code each and every time. There's a way you can do it, which is very simple. You can create another folder, call it layouts. Okay, after having the layouts folder, we can create a file called, let's say master.play.php. Now what do I need to be retaining? I need to retain what is here to here. I'll have to remove it here, and I need to retain what is here to here. I'll have to put it over here. So we'll introduce something called yield. Okay, this yield, we can give it a name, let's say content. Okay, now if I come to this, okay, let me go back to here so that you can see it has no styling. If you look at the structure over here, it's just section to section basically. So I need to introduce it over here. Now what happens is that you use another something else we call extends. At extends, now what are we extending? What we are extending, we are extending the master, not master really, the folder name, that is the layouts, and then the file name, which is the master, and then we have a section. Now the section is based on what you yielded over there. The section name was, what was the section name? If you come to master, we give it a section name from this yield, which is called content. And then what do we do next? We end section. Okay, sorry, it's my keyboard. And section. Okay, now that if I come back here and refresh this page, you'll notice that everything comes back to normal, and over here everything comes back to normal. And the issue was about us. How to introduce it to about us? The same way we have done over here is the same way we do it over there. So we extend this, at extends. What are extending? The view is layouts, which is the folder name dot master. And then what do we do next? We add a section. It's my keyboard. We add a section. What is the section name? It's called content. And then we actually end section. End section. Sorry, my keyboard. End section. End section. So that if I come and refresh this page, there'll be no major change, but this is the only change I'll have. If I want to go home page, if I want to go about us, if I want to go home page, I want to go about us. Now there are two ways you can add this hrefs over here. There are two ways you can add it so that it points to somewhere else. One of the ways I've showed you, you can use the routes, the named routes. There's another way you can do it that I rarely use. I don't know why. So we have slash. Okay, this is the URL. We'll have slash, and then the URL will have about us. So we introduce something else. Instead of having route, we'll have what you call URL. Okay, now for this case, the URL for this is this. It is not homepage. This is a named route. It is this slash. So we'll have this slash over here. Okay, this URL actually reads from the URL itself. Now we also have about us over here. It is not this about us, it is this about us. This is for named routes, and this is for the URL part itself. So we can go back to our master, and we have a URL called what? About us. So that if I refresh this page again, if I go to home page, it takes me to home page. About us, go to about us, home page again, and that is how what we have basically over there. Now, with that being said, we actually need to begin doing configurations and adding and doing configurations and introducing the concepts of form and database. Thank you for listening, and hope nothing is hard. And if there's anything hard, you can ping me through my email over there so that we can discuss more over the same. Thank you. Welcome guys. We've already done application installation and application structure. We have done much on routing, views, and controllers. We are currently going to check configuration. Now, the only configuration I'm going to check currently is on the database. Now, in Laravel, we have a .env file over here. It's at the bottom. Now you can configure pretty much a lot of things. I'll be checking on these two things right now, this part and this part. Now you can set the app name over here, like in this case it's called Laravel. Let me give it another name, maybe blog, and I'll tell you not what to do. Now how do I access this? There's a way you can access it, which is pretty much easy. Now there's a point that you'll actually be forced to call these things as you advance, and you'll call them several times in your project, and this is how you do it. Suppose I want to call this, I want to call the app name. It's quite simple. Oh, it was content. It's quite simple. I just use function called config app.name. This calls the app name, and you will see that the app name actually will be displayed over here. It's called the blog series. Now that being said, don't worry much about it. That is something that might come handy in future, and if you remember, well and good. Now we have a database here. Currently we are using MySQL. I said that in advanced series we might use another type of database, hopefully. So we have the database connection, MySQL, we have the host, we have the port, the name and username, and the password. Okay, so for the configuration part, we have to, I assume you have MySQL installed in your system. I assume you have PHP my admin over here. So let me create a new database. Let me call it blog series. Now this is my database over here. I can come and introduce the name. This is the database name, blog series, and we have the password. I have a password here that I can't even remember. I don't know whether it's that, but we'll see. Now that is how you configure your database. Basically, after configuring your database, when things are good, there will be no error, but when things are wrong, there'll be an error. Now one thing you must notice that, for example, here in future, you suppose you any error made on this file will cause you problems. .env, it might even make the project not to run. For example, if you leave spacing of here blog series, it will drop an error that you might notice in future. You'll not even be seeing anything. This is one of the ways troubleshooting will help in future, and if you're troubleshooting, this will come handy, because you'll notice that it doesn't run, so you don't know what's going on and what is not happening. Kindly check .env for anything, and the best way to do this, if you have some things like spacing over there, is that you add what you call this, you add that blog series. And if you just write your blog series, there's no problem, because in future you might notice that you see nothing, you totally have nothing, you don't know what to do about it, and you might wonder. Now that is what happens most of the time. Now it comes back as blog series. Now with that being said, hopefully I believe you have checked the configurations, and maybe let's check the forms and database on our next tutorial. Thank you. Now guys, the next thing you're checking on is actually how do we create forms and how do we add them to the database. Now I'll start by doing the database stuff. In Laravel we have what you call eloquent, which is a very good way of you actually creating databases or reading from databases itself. Now, I told you initially we had something called migrations, that suppose you create a migration, they'll appear here and you'll migrate them and they'll be uploaded to over here to your database instead of manually adding the databases. Now, how do we do it? Now, first of all, we have to create something called a model, which is a way of interacting with your table itself. Now, to create a model, we need to write this code php artisan make. You make a model first. For example, you need to create a model database called blogs. Now, in order for us to create a database called blogs, we need to create a model called blog. Now, this model blog, we need a migration for it, so we need to add something. We need to add negative m besides it, or we can write negative migration. So we click enter, and we'll see we have something called create blogs table, and create blogs table is over here, and we have a model here called blog. Don't worry much about this. So for the database, we need to create a database over here, okay, and then we migrate it to our server, to our database. Okay, so we'll need to have a table. For example, we already have id and timestamp by default. They're already added for you because they're required anyway. So what do we need? We need for example, in our blog, we need the blog title. We need the blog title. It's a string and it's the title. Okay, and then we also need what else do we need? We need the blog text. Okay, I think they're the only two things we need for now. And then after writing the code over there, we need to migrate this. We do php artisan migrate, simple. And previously we had some migrations that were created by Laravel, and mine is over here, create blogs table. If I come here and refresh blog series, you'll see I have a table called blogs, okay, which has a title, text, created that. And if you look at the structure, we have varchar id is big int, and it is ai, that is auto increment, and then we have created that and updated that as the timestamps. Now that is the easiest way to do so. I won't talk much about that for now, but I need you to have a better understanding of how migrations work and how are they related to the model themselves. Now we need to create a form, and our form should actually add data over here. I want you to understand that for forms you use post. For other things that you need to retrieve data from the database, you use get, right? So let me create a form over here. Let me create a form over here. Let me create a form with get, with post. Now I have an action. Let's leave it blank for now. Now what do we need over here? We need an input type of text, and then let's give it a name. It's the text, which is the text. Let's give it a placeholder, maybe text. Add blog title. So it's a title, it's not a text. Sorry. So we also need to have another input. We need to have another input. Let's give it the name, or rather we can have a text area. We can have a text area. What is the name of this text area? Maybe it's the blog text. It's the text. We don't need id for now, and there we go. Let me go back and refresh my page and see what happens. You'll get something very ugly. Let me grab the bootstrap cdn real quick. Let me grab the bootstrap cdn and add it to master. This is something also you might want to use in future. So I have the css and I need the js. Okay, so it's a script. Okay, we have it over there. I hope it will look something better. Not that better. So okay, let me add my form over here, maybe outside this section, because it came with its own styling. And then div.form group, and we'll have this over there, and let's give it a class of form control. And we'll also give the text area class of form control, and we need to introduce another div, and here we have, let's see how it looks like. Very ugly. Okay, let me add a button. So we have button submit. Let's give it a class of btn success, or primary. Let me give it success. So we need to add some data here, and this data should be added to our database. I'll teach you one way to do it, and in the advanced series I'll teach you another way to do it, hopefully. Let me add a break over here. Okay, so we have a form here that we need sorry, we have a form here that we need to add some data, and the data should be added to our database. Now in Laravel we have something called CSRF token. What happens with this is CSRF is that it actually identifies who is this guy actually adding data. Is it from our server, or is it from somewhere else? Because basically you can add this data from anywhere else. Just add the URL. For example, let's say you have like facebook.com, and then you need to post this data like blog post. Suppose they have something like that. Laravel actually is used to identify this guy is actually adding data from our server, not outside our server. Okay, and that is what needs to happen, because it is an issue with security itself, and needs to be checked on. So if you quickly view our page source, you see there's a form added, input type hidden. It has a token, a very long token over there. Yes. Now, how do I post this data to my database? To start with, we need an action. Okay, now this action we can add here, add blog to database. Okay, how do I post this data? Now to post it, we need to have a route. Now the route has a post method. Okay, now let's say maybe add blog. Okay, let me give it add blog. Let me just give it a name of the same, add blog. Now what you should notice is that this URL, when posting this URL and this function and the name, they don't have to be the same. That is just something that I've just done. In most of the tutorial you'll get is that people just say it and never say why they do so. I've given you a reason over the same. So we have add blog over here. So we are going to create a function here called public function add blog. Okay, and let's leave it that way for now. Let me return just 1 2 3. And what we do here is that we are going to add an action which is always in form of a URL, but in this case we are going to add a route. I'm using named routes. You can also use the other type of route that you can use URL slash add blog based on what I said initially, because we have add blog to over here. You can use URL or route, and you'll see if I refresh this source page, you have the URL over there. And actually, if I try navigating over here, it will tell me it's registered as post, not get, and hence it can't work. The get method is not supported, but it supports only posts. Now let's add our data and then see what happens. How do we store this data? Okay, so how do we do it? We're going to add our data. Let's say the title is first blog. Let's say first blog here. Okay, and then we need to submit. Now it returns 1 2 3. This is the post. This is where we actually need it to point at. Now in PHP we had something called return at posts, which is actually used to get all the post data that were added in a page. For example, we have the token over here, we have the title and the text. Now in Laravel we have something called request, and using it is quite simple. We just had it over here, request as request, and then return all the requests. Okay, now if I refresh, it's the same thing, same thing. You can use that negative at post, or you can use at request, but you have to call it over here. Right, now what happens next is that I like this being here. What happens next is that we need to get the title. Let's create a variable called title. Now what is the title? The title is at request input title, and then we have also at text. What is text? It is at request input. Where's the text? The text is over there, text. Okay, and then what do we do next? The next thing to do is we have the variables, we have already declared them, and we have already captured them from the post data. So what do we do next? We need to add this to our database. That is where the model comes in. We created a model initially called blog, which points to our database basically. Now how do we use it? In order to use it, we are going to create a new instance. For example, at blog is a new instance of blog, right? Now at blog, not at $sign blog, this blog itself has a text, if you come to the database, it has a title. The title is known as, the title is represented by the title variable, and the blog text is represented by the text variable, right? And then what do? We save. Okay, very simple. And then we can return at request, and then we say this, maybe let's say this guy, it's already added successfully. Okay, now once I come and refresh this page from here, because it's already post, you'll see that it's telling me it's added successfully. So simple. Now if I go back to my blog series table and check my blogs table, and you'll notice that there is some data added, including created at and updated at over there. Now there's another way to do it. I won't talk about it again, but it's also a very good way of adding them. As long as you sanitize your inputs, you're good to go. Now I need to return this guy to the previous page that we were in, instead of just telling him, okay, you know what, your blog was added successfully. What do? We just return redirect. We can redirect him back, or we can return redirect him in that particular route and return add the route name, which is the home page. Okay, is it the home page really? Yeah, it is the home page. Now these are two ways you can do it, but I prefer the first one over the second one because the second one has a lot of code and the first one has less code. So let me just do this: return, redirect back. Okay, and it will just redirect back. There we are. I think it just added another set of data. Now, as a user, what do you prefer? Do you prefer seeing this type of message, or you prefer being showed some piece of string over there telling you that maybe your data has been added successfully, or yeah, that is what you'll prefer basically. So what happens is that if you want to show any type of message, let's say we need this guy to see the message, we can add the message here. Now the best way to do it in Laravel is that we use something called session, and we can use session. So if you come over here and we can session, and then we flash that session, which means it will only appear once, and we'll flash the session. What do we need this guy to see? This session flash, let's call it message. Okay, and let's tell him your blog has been added successfully. Okay, now what next do we need to do? Next we need to display this in our content over here. We need to display it over here somewhere to show this guy that it has been added. Let me use the HTML over there, and then we say let's first we need to check if the session has message that we called over there. Now if it has message, what do we do? Let me end if. For every if there's an end if. For every section there's an ending end section. For each there's an ending end for each. Now we need to display this message here. Let me use an alert. And by the way, this type of, I don't know, code completion is in a certain package. It's not Laravel. I don't know its name. It completes things very quickly and makes work easier. So we have session get. What do we get? We get the message. Okay, now let's add some data. Now if you refresh it currently, it won't display anything because it doesn't have a session over here. Okay, let's say blog 2, and then blog 2, and then submit. It says okay, your blog has been successfully added, and if I come back and refresh the page, the blog has been successfully added. Now how do I display this data now down here? This is the interesting part. Now this is how you display the data. Again, it's still in like this function. It's still in our home page, right? Now let me create a variable called data, or maybe blog data, and I need to display all the blogs. It's quite simple. Just say blog, which is the model name, and then you just get all of them, right? Now I told you the simple way we can do it to avoid repeating ourselves. You can say with page. WP is again totally made up. With page blog data, right? And then we go back to our content over here, and this is one of the blogs. So we can say maybe for each. Laravel use for each sorry for each as blog, and then what do? We end for each. Now basically, before I add any type of data, you'll notice that I might have three or four that look similar. Let's see. Oh, there's a syntax error. Okay, unexpected end of file, because I didn't add end for each. So we have end for each over here. Once I refresh this page, you'll see that we have an end for each, and we have about 3 sets of data: 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now, how do I display the title and the content, and maybe how do I display the date, leave alone the category? Now we will have to display this way. Now I already have at $blog over here. I already have the blog. So blog as a variable, and then this is the title. Okay, simple, right? So we also have, let me add it here. We also have the blog, and we have the created at. Okay, and we also have this blog, and it is the blog text. How did I call it from the database? From the database, it's called text. It ought to have been something very, very long. So we have blog text. Okay, so if I refresh this page real quick, some data should be displayed, and we have first blog, blog 2, blog here, created at. And that is how I display the data. I've not displayed the images, but I will do so in a moment. So this is what we have currently. We have the first blog, and we have blog 2. Now the next thing to do is that I need to click over here, and it takes me to a specific blog. Right now we are going to create a route. First of all, let's add a route, and let's say maybe specific blog. Okay, and it's going to be it's getting a specific blog. It's going to be get. So let's call it maybe show blog, and let's add an ID. Maybe we are going to use an ID because it's the primary key over there. And we are going to also have show blog, and then lastly, let me just call it show blog. Okay, so how do we pass an ID in the view over here? For example, in the view over here, okay, it's read more. Let me use ahref. Let me add an href over here. Now how do we do this? Now we still use the route because I prefer named routes, and then we use show blog. Now in order for us to pass an ID, it's quite simple. Just add a comma over here, and then we pass the blog ID. Okay, so that if I refresh this page, no error, which is very, very right. Now I need to click read more here, and it automatically takes me to specific blog. How do I do it? Now I already need to create a function and call it show blog. So I go to pages controller, and then I create show blog. So I'll have public function show blog, and then we pass the ID. Let me return the ID real quick. Okay, now if I click read more, okay, let me use this blog too. If I click read more, it displays 3. Now how do I read this ID from the database and display the relevant records? Now let me use that data is equal to, so we are going to find a blog, and then we find, okay, just let me use find ID. Let's display the data. Let me return the data. Okay, now if I refresh this page, you'll see that all details of blog 3 have been displayed over here. Now what happens when I have another blog that doesn't exist, like blog 4? Now the best way to do it is find or fail. Now if it fails to get blog 3, it should probably display an error. Okay, like not found for this case, but you can have custom errors. Now in .env we can there's a place called app debug, which is true, set to true or false. If you set it to true, it assumes that you don't want to show debugging errors, but if you set it to false, it means you will have something else different. Let me refresh this page. Oh, it's not showing. Okay, I'll check the reason why it doesn't do so. So that is what happens basically. So we have blog 3, and we have all the details of blog 3. Let's see, is it blog 3? It's blog 3. So we have blog 3. Why is it not showing me blog 3? Oh, I know why it's not showing me blog 3, because there's nothing like, I already figured it out. It's blog with small b. It's forcing me to go back there, I don't know why. But we have blog 3 over here. Let me try with 5 and see what happens. Now doing something blank. Okay, so we have to return the data over here, which it returns perfectly, the details. Now we can return another view. We can say show blog, or we can say maybe it's in the blogs. How do we call the folder? We called it blog, and then after blog we have something. Let's create show. Okay, so in blog let's create a file called show.blade.php. okay, so let me write d. Okay, maybe h1, blog title. I'll use this as the skeleton to display the data. Blog text, blog created at. So if I refresh this page real quick, you see that there's a blog title. Now how do I pass this data to be displayed here? Now it's so simple. I said it initially, and totally made up WP with page, and we can have that array with page, and we can actually pass it over here. We compact with page. There's some situations that compact doesn't work. I don't know an example of the same, but if it doesn't work, you can use with. Yeah, so we have with page data, so we should go to the show and show the data over here. So we'll have with page title, and then you can also have with page text, and we can also have with the page created at, right? So that if I go and refresh this page, all the details are shown successfully, right? Now with that being said, how do I actually delete this data? Suppose I want to delete this blog. How do I delete this blog? Well, we can use an href tag, and let's create another route. Let's give it a route of maybe delete blog, and remember we need to pass something like the ID. Okay, and we have with page data, and then we need to pass what we call ID. Now it currently doesn't exist, so it should throw an error. Yeah, the route delete blog doesn't exist, so we are going to create a route So we delete blog. So we create a route and let's give it delete, and then delete blog. We pass an ID, okay, and then pages controller class, and let's call it maybe delete blog. Let's use named name. Let's say delete blog. Now with that being said, we need to go to pages controller, public function delete blog, then we pass in an ID, and then let's return an ID maybe to see which blog do we need to delete. Now let's refresh this page. It should be working, and my ahref tag is nowhere to be seen. Okay, let me add delete, so that if I refresh this page, it's here. Let's delete. Oh, get method is not supported for this route. Only delete. What have I done now? Let me check. Most of the time I usually use post to delete. I don't know why. Most of the time I usually use post to delete. I never use get anyway. Get is not safe because anyone can run the URL and delete anything that is deleted. Oh, I just figured it out. Oh, okay. So what we need to do is that let's add a form. Let's add that CSRF. Okay. And then the next thing we really need to kind of do, let's give it a method. Let's say post, and then we need to have this data but in the form of maybe button. Okay, so let's have an input, and this input should be submit, and let's say delete, and the next thing we really need to do is add our action over here, so that we come and paste it over here, and we already have an action. So the next thing to do is add this at method delete. There are very many ways to do it, but this is for beginner series. This is how you can actually do it, and then with that being said and done, we can test it out. You see it returns blog 3. Okay, so how do I now delete this blog? Now to delete this, it's quite simple. We get the ID like blog, and then we find the ID. So we find the ID. Let's see first whether it exists. Does it really exist? Let's see whether it exists. Yeah, it actually gets the blog over here. Now, in order for us to actually delete it, we can do this. We can find we can add delete over here. We find this blog and then we delete it, and then return deleted. Let's refresh the page and see it's deleted already. And if I come to my database, there were 3, they'll actually remain 2. Okay, now that is the easiest way to delete. And I want you to notice that thing. After deleting, if you redirect back to the same page, you will not get the page because it doesn't exist. Like for this case currently, okay, I can do this, but if I refresh this page, this blog 3 doesn't exist currently. Okay, it is trying to get title of undefined. This blog doesn't exist currently. That is why we were having something like find or fail. If it doesn't find it, then it brings error 44. That is why we are using find or fail. You see, it doesn't exist, so we can't use return redirect back to the same page, but you can use return redirect maybe to the home page. Return redirect route, maybe home page. Okay, and that is how it's done. And let's refresh this page. Let me just refresh this page. If I refresh this page, there should be 2. And let me say I want to read more, but I don't really need to do that. I just need to delete it. Comes back over here. Okay, and I delete again, it comes back over here. And remember, as an assignment for you, you can add a session message here to display maybe your blog has been deleted successfully. Okay, now let's add one other blog. I want to show you how to edit blogs. Edit blogs. This blog is about to be edited. Okay, then we submit. So we have a blog over here. Now, how do I edit this blog? So let's add a new href and give it a route. Maybe let's say we give it a name, edit blog. With this, I want to teach one concept, and then let's use with page and get ID. Okay, let's create a route called edit blog. So let's say editing blogs. So we'll have a route. Let's have a route, and let's say it's edit blogs. No, wrong. It's a get method, and it's edit blog. Edit blog. And what happens next is that we have to pass in an ID, and then it is pages controller, and then we have the class, let's say edit blog. Again, the name of the function doesn't matter, or what you call the method. And then we have the name, we call it edit blog, right? So let's create a function called edit blog, where this edit blog is based on this, not this or this. So we are going to create a public function, that is called edit blog, and then we pass in an ID and return ID, return ID. Sorry, let's see whether the ID exists. So it loads well. Okay, Again, I forgot something very important that I always keep on forgetting. Edit block. If I used to JavaScript, most of the time we don't even use href. We use something like a div, so that when you click it, something happens. So maybe you can use a span with an icon. Maybe if you click that icon, it reads on click in JavaScript, and then something happens. So let's see, edit blog. So I need to return a view that will edit my blog, right? So first I need to find this blog. So at data or data is blog. Let's use find or fail, and then you pass in an id, and then let's return a view. Okay, totally made up with page, then return a view, return view blog dot, which is the folder name, and then let's create a file called show blog. Okay, so I'll have to navigate to my folders, and I'll check blog here, and I'll have to create a file and call it show blog dot blade dot php. So this is where I need to actually display the blog details. Forgive me for this, but I'll have to navigate to the content, and I just need to pick this form again because I want to use it. I really need to use it again, and I don't want to write it from scratch. So I've just taken the form alone. So let me refresh over here and see what happens. So as usual, in order for us to display the data, I already have this edit blog function here. So I'll have to compact with page, totally made up, not WordPress, with page, totally made up again. So we'll have to go to the show blog. Actually, it should be edit blog. Forgive my naming. You can name in anything but relevant. So have with page. So let's give it a value. Let me just remove the placeholder. Let me give it a value, and the value is with page. For example, in this case, we have with the page, it's data, and in this case we have the title. And if I go back and refresh, the title should be displayed over here, and also we have the text area. We can also have this data, but in this case we'll have the text. So I can go and refresh, and it will be displayed. Now how do I, let me show it this way. How do I actually edit this data now that I have it? Now let's create another route. Okay, I'll retain the route over here, but add some couple of things. I'll say edit blog post, or maybe I'll say yeah, edit blog post, and I'll also say edit blog post, or just edit blog. There's no problem, as long as this URL can look like this URL, but as long as you change the method, there's no problem. Like in this case, it's post. Okay, so this is edit blog. Okay, now what happens next? I'll go to pages controller. I'll create a function called edit blog post, public function edit blog post. Then we'll pass in an id, and then at data, maybe let's say at blog, no, blog will find or fail the id. Let me return a data and then see, return $data. If I use at instead of $, hope you understand what I mean. So real quick, I'm going to edit blog post. To add edit blog post, edit blog, is it small b or capital B? capital B, edit blog post, edit blog post, and then I pass in an ID with page data, and then I pass in an ID. Now let's do and see whether it happens. Let's try and see whether it works. Edit blogs, edited. This blog has been edited just now, and then let's submit. So it points towards that URL, right? So initially I told you about request and how it works the same way as post in PHP, in pure PHP. So we can have request as request. Doesn't matter, you can call it a rec, you can call it any name, but I prefer this. So we have a title. Now let me return request first, and then we see what happens and see whether it works. Now this is from the database, and this is from the input. Okay, so we need to get the title and the text input. So let's have the title, and then we'll have at request title, at request. Okay, you can use request title or request input title. Please go and research as to why we can't why one is preferred over the other one. And we can also have at text, and then we have at request input, can have text, right? So now how do I actually add these things to the database? Quite simple, the same way we were doing it previously. There's some similarities. So we can have data, and it reads text from the database, and it passes a variable text. And then we can also have at data title, it reads at $sign title from here, and then it saves. And then it saves. Okay, and then what happens next? We can return redirect back, or we can return to redirect route. Which route are we redirecting to? We need to show this. Okay, we can redirect to home page maybe, and let's show this session success message here, and maybe say your blog has been edited successfully. Okay, so if I refresh this real quick, you see your blog has been edited successfully. You have this blog has just been edited now, and the title, which seems to have disappeared. And this is, let's check and see why this blog, the title has just disappeared. Let's go to our home page. Our home page was actually content. Where's our title? We have a blog title, which seems not to be displaying. And okay, our title, our text. So our title is somewhere hidden over here. I think it's because of the span. Span usually has some small issues that I don't understand why. And here we go. It's hidden again. Okay, let me pick it from here, and let me just add it anywhere. It's becoming a nuisance. This edited blog edited, and we have the data. So I've taught you how to read data, I've taught you how to edit the blog itself, and I've also taught you how to delete the blog. So with that being said, I think that is a very good explanation of how Laravel works basically. And hopefully in the next tutorial, let's check what you have on the table. Hopefully the next tutorial will check on authentication and middleware, so to speak. Thank you.